pastoring would like to spend 12, 15, 20 hours making a message and preparing that, organizing, thinking it through. So I've had about 12 minutes. But I think I have something that'll be fun for you tonight. I have a book, and I saw a few of you looking through it. I'm going to use kind of as guideline. It's called Essentials for Life. And one of the things that was funny to me about a testimony meeting is that growing up in church, growing up in kind of an old-fashioned kind of Baptist church, if you will, what that means, but very traditional church, we occasionally would have a testimony meeting. And if you've been around church for a while, that can either be exciting or just really dull. Because as a kid, I would sit there and listen to people. I'd see someone, a senior adult, stand up who was 55, 60, 75, 85, 112. It looked really old to me when I was a little kid. But a testimony always seemed to relate back to when a person became a Christian. They would say, well, back then, when I was 12 years old, preacher revived, and they would give their testimony of their salvation experience, and then that was the end. I always thought, it's just not a real good selling point. It's kind of like, the first day was wonderful, but nothing's happened since. Kathy and I she went to play golf, took a golf lesson last week, and I played golf, and we met with some of the ladies she was playing with afterwards. And one of the ladies asked the other lady how she got here, how she got down to live in this area. And the lady that was answering the question just shared about, she and her husband lived here or there, and they did this, and went through some of the steps about how she got there. And here we are at the clubhouse at the golf course, and the lady says, in the middle of her explaining, she says, really, that's kind of what happened, but it was all a God thing. Whoa. And the lady sitting next to her who had asked the question, listening, said, yeah, it has to be. He is so big and so wonderful. We're so small. Why don't we just let him? I'm going, ladies, preach on! Shout, and it's kind of, what a great testimony meeting. Maybe we need to go move to the clubhouse or the golf course. But I told Kathy one time, I said, that's as good a testimony meeting as I've ever heard anywhere. Because it started back there, but it was about what happened last week. So what I want to do, and this is not a directed testimony meeting, but I would like you to share a little bit. Crosswinds, this is our third birthday as a congregation meeting. And so just to honor that request, in the last 2-3 years, and this is not about Crosswinds as a group, but maybe something since we've met you in this time frame that you might share with us that has gone on. If you want to just share something the Lord is doing in your life, and I'll introduce one that that God's been doing in our life. I pastored for right at 30 years when we moved down here, so I spent a lot of time in the ministry. We pastored a very large church, 550 people, so we've been in the ministry for quite some time. And I surrendered the ministry when I was 16, so I've been at this for 45 years. One of the things that I was just thinking about, what can I share that would be kind of a cool image is, and one of the things that God's been doing in my life is changing the way I look at Christianity. Not in a theological way, but in a way that people who are believers in Christ express themselves, like those two ladies did. I would have never pegged them for churchy people, because the one lady, she's an ex-Marine, and I'm thinking, but I'm going, there's a God thing. I'm going, that's so cool. And so let me explain, if I can, kind of using I like visual illustration. So growing up, my view of Christianity, if you will, was a straight line, if you will. Let's draw a straight line. If you can imagine a nice long straight line. Now, my line that I believe, kind of like, here were the boundaries of what happens in the realm of Christianity. It was pretty wide. Now I knew some people growing up that their understanding was pretty doggone narrow, and you either did this, and this, and you probably weren't much of a Christian. I had a pretty wide understanding of that, all through my life. That you didn't have to be just like me, talk like me, dress like me. I didn't have any problem with that. But what God has begun to show me is, rather than a big line, a single pathway of here's the Christian walk, I'm beginning to see that there are lots of maybe lines coming out from a central point, that central point being Christ. Does that make sense? So I've gone from a straight line to like a wagon's wheels. And it's not that it's it's do your own thing. It's just different people relate to Christ differently. I shared a testimony with an artist friend several years ago, and she asked me, she said, "Are you one of those people who thinks Jesus is the only way?" And I said to her, the short answer is yes. Let me explain that. What I mean by that is I'm not saying I know everything. But I want to tell you, if you get to heaven someday, you're going to have to thank Jesus somehow, some way, somehow. And she went, "Oh, I can handle that." So I went from a nice sized line to realizing there are lots of people who are still followers of Christ. And in the last year, let's take it from a two-dimensional line to a two-dimensional wagon wheel, now to lots of wagon wheels. It goes every direction. Do you see the difference? So now it's a three-dimensional thing. And there are people that I have met in the last year who I would now call them brother or sister. They're followers, they're believers, they're fellow family members of Christ. That 15 years ago, not judgmentally, but just because I didn't know, didn't understand. It's like speaking a different language. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. I just didn't know the language. That God has begun to help me see that, and I've said this for a long, long time, that Jesus is the kernel. He's the one that matters, and everything else is peripheral, is extra. Now, there's some peripheral that's more important than others, but the most important thing is that we have Christ as that foundational relationship and understanding. And you may speak a different language, you may do some things differently. It's okay. I talked to one of my former staff members the other night on the phone, and he was doing a home Bible study. And one of the guys in his group was asking, well, and it's just funny to me now, I'm laughing going, I can't believe anyone asked a question. But he says, well, now, the Holy Spirit really doesn't work till after we've done a hymn out of the hymnal, right? And my staff member said to the guy, says, how's that work in China? They don't got hymnals there. And he kind of went, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Don't put God in a box. And one of my friends years ago came in and told me something. She said, I just realized I had God in a box. It was a really, really, really big box, but it was still a box. And I kind of went, don't try and box him up. And I'm not sure that's what I was, but it's just your brain can only understand so much. And so share a testimony about what you're learning from God, where you found Him, what He's all about. Let me share with you a little bit of reading here. This is called, this book I just shared with you a little bit. Let me get back to the right page here. Refine your image of God. Let me just read a passage here. Everyone has an image of God. Whether it's a visual description or an abstract concept, that image affects the way a person relates to God, trusts Him, and presents God to others. What's your image of God? That's my question then to start your testimony. What's your image of God? How do you see Him? Just in one word, 2 words, 3 words. I see God as what? Give me a description of how do you see God?
Creator.
Creator.
My God, He breathes out stars.
Okay. How else? You see God. What's your image of God when you think?
Mike is His Father.
Father. Okay.
Holy.
Holy. Cool.
Almighty God.
Almighty.
I was thinking all-encompassing.
Everything.
Yeah.
8 words.
Yeah. So think of in the scriptures. What are some of the words, titles, roles that we see Jesus presenting Himself? For instance, He's the Good Shepherd. So God is sometimes the Good Shepherd, which is good to know when you are a lost sheep. There's a good shepherd out there. Now tonight, you don't feel like a lost sheep. You feel like a sheep in the sheepfold, so you're not thinking shepherd. But what might you be thinking? What other roles was Jesus? If your tummy's grumbling, you might think of Jesus as the
Great physician.
Bread of life. If you got a headache, as the great physician.
The healer, yes.
As the healer. Or if you're lost in the dark, not lost, but can't find your way, He is the light of the world. Wow. What a great way to share our faith with someone instead of having this, stereotypical concept of who God is. you're sitting with someone at work, you're sitting with someone on a break, you're just talking to a friend, and they're struggling with health, they're struggling with darkness, they're struggling with lostness, they're struggling with pain. Instead of presenting God as just this big something out there, He's the healer, He's the light, He's the love, He's the shepherd. Does it make sense? How do you see God today? In the last week, the last couple of days, as you've had a quiet time, is He your healer? Is He your teacher? Is He your guide? What is it?
God.
Guide. I love that one. What else?
Friend.
Friend. I like that too. Cool.
Restorer.
Restorer. The song "Jesus, Lover of My Soul." I've been humming that all day long. Jesus, Lover of my soul. I like that song. So, Restorer. Cool. What else? So
Ever present.
ever present.
Present.
Yeah. I love how children explain God. Our son Micah, years and years ago, he was just a little guy, and he was beginning to wrestle with some of those big concepts, and he's trying to understand God's omnipotence, His omniscience, His knowing everything and being all powerful. And so one day he was saying, "So if I hide in my closet, does God know where I am?" Well, yeah, He knows where you are. Well, what if I cover myself up with 3 blankets? He still knows where you are. What if I hide under the table and don't move for a long time? Can you see me? Yeah, I can see you. He says something like, it's cool because there's that little image of God. But if we don't grow in our image of God, we spend our adult life relating to Him as a child would, missing out. That doesn't mean we have an unchildlike faith, because that's just a tender trusting in God. But our understanding of who God can change and can grow. 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 22 says, "O great you are, O sovereign Lord, there is no ever even heard of another one like you." That's cool. That God is that great. By the light of nature, this is a quote from Matthew Henry, by the light of nature, we see God as God above us. By the light of the law, the rules that we have in the Word, we see Him as a God against us, because He says don't do those bad things. But by the light of the gospel, we see Him as Emmanuel, God with us.
That's like a heart.
Yeah, that's like a heart. If your image of God has never matured, or is not matured much beyond the way you thought of Him as a child, it's time for you to let that image be transformed. Because how we understand Him allows Him to work in our lives. So, thoughts or comments on that? I'll just let you respond. So that way, other than just